It was the kind of cold that seeped through your jacket and settled in your bones. Ethan Cole pulled his collar tighter. As he walked home from his late shift, at the auto repair shop, the city felt unusually quiet for a Friday night. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks, and the distant hum of traffic blended with the wind. He was tired. Not just physically, but the deeper kind of tired, the kind that comes from trying your best every single day and still feeling like you're barely moving forward. At 29, Ethan's life hadn't exactly gone the way he planned. His father's medical bills had drained his savings before he passed away last year. His girlfriend had left a month later, saying she needed someone with ambition. Now it was just Ethan and a small rented apartment that always felt a little too silent. As he turned the corner near an old convenience store, he heard something. A faint sound. Almost like crying. He stopped. The wind carried it again. A small, broken whimper. Ethan frowned and scanned the street. At first, he saw nothing but an overturned trash can and scattered cardboard boxes. Then one of the boxes moved. He stepped closer. Inside, curled into itself and shaking violently, was a tiny puppy. Its fur was muddy and matted. One ear drooped awkwardly. Its ribs showed through its thin body. Big brown eyes stared up at him, wide, terrified, and exhausted. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, kneeling down. The puppy tried to stand but stumbled instead. There was no collar, no blanket, no food, just an abandoned life in a box on a freezing sidewalk. Ethan swallowed hard. He checked around, hoping someone might come running, saying it was theirs. No one did. Cars passed. People walked by without slowing down. The puppy let out another weak whine. And in that moment, Ethan felt something crack open inside him. He remembered sitting in a hospital room beside his father, watching machines breathe for him. He remembered the loneliness afterward, the feeling of being left behind. "I know," he murmured softly. "I know what that feels like." He took off his flannel jacket and gently wrapped the puppy inside. It was so light it barely weighed anything. Ethan hesitated for a second. He barely had enough money for himself. His fridge at home contained leftover takeout and half a carton of eggs. Vet bills, vaccinations, food. It wasn't practical. But neither was leaving the puppy there. He stood up and cradled it carefully against his chest. "Guess you're coming home with me," he said quietly. The puppy's tiny body trembled, but it pressed closer to him as if it understood. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that decision, made in the cold under a flickering streetlight, was about to change his life in ways he never imagined. And what happened next would leave him completely speechless. Ethan named him Lucky. It felt ironic at first. The puppy had been abandoned, underfed, and alone. But maybe surviving that night meant he was lucky after all. The next morning, Ethan skipped breakfast and took Lucky to the nearest veterinary clinic. He braced himself for the bill. The vet, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes, examined the puppy carefully. "He's malnourished," she said softly. "But no broken bones. No serious illness. That's a miracle." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "He'll need vaccines and proper nutrition," she continued. "And a lot of love." "That part one can handle," Ethan said. When it came time to pay, Ethan handed over almost everything in his checking account without hesitation. As he carried Lucky out of the clinic, the puppy, now cleaned up and wrapped in a small blue blanket, looked completely different. His fur was a soft golden brown. His eyes were brighter. For the first time, his tail wagged. It was small, weak, but it wagged. Back at the apartment, Ethan improvised a bed from an old hoodie and a pillow. Lucky explored cautiously, sniffing every corner. Then he trotted back and sat right at Ethan's feet. "You don't trust me yet, huh?" Ethan smiled. Lucky tilted his head. That night, for the first time in months, Ethan didn't eat dinner alone. Days turned into weeks. Lucky grew stronger, healthier, louder. He chewed on Ethan's shoelaces and barked at the vacuum cleaner. He followed Ethan everywhere, even waiting by the door every evening before his shift ended. Something else changed too. Ethan started smiling more. He found himself talking to Lucky about his day, about the customers at the shop, about how he missed his dad. And somehow, saying it out loud didn't feel as heavy anymore. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan decided to take Lucky to the park. It was sunny, the air crisp but bright. Families laughed near the playground. Joggers passed by with headphones on. Lucky ran in circles, chasing leaves like they were treasures. That's when Ethan noticed an older man sitting alone on a bench nearby. The man watched Lucky intently. After a few minutes, he slowly stood and approached. "That's a beautiful dog," the man said, his voice trembling slightly. "Thanks," Ethan replied. "Found him on the street." The man's eyes widened. "On Maple Avenue." Ethan blinked. "Yeah, near an old convenience store." The man's face went pale. That can't be." His hand shook as he stepped closer, kneeling carefully. He whispered one word. "Buddy." Lucky froze. His ears perked up. And then, without hesitation, he bolted toward the man, tail wagging wildly. Ethan stared in shock. The puppy leaped into the man's arms, licking his face, whining loudly. The man broke down crying right there in the park. "I've been looking for him for 3 weeks," he sobbed. "Someone stole him from my yard." Ethan's heart dropped. Lucky wasn't abandoned. He had been taken. And now, he had found his way back. Ethan stood there, speechless, as the man held the dog like he had just been given his entire world back. He never saw this coming. The man's name was Walter Hayes. He was 72 years old and lived alone. "Buddy was my late wife's gift to me," Walter explained, wiping his eyes. "After she passed, he was the only thing that made the house feel alive." Ethan's chest tightened. He understood that kind of silence, that kind of emptiness. Walter looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "You saved him," he said. "You saved my boy." Ethan shook his head quickly. "I just found him." "No," Walter insisted. "You chose to care." They sat on the bench together as Lucky, Buddy, curled between them. Walter explained how someone had broken into his backyard and taken the puppy. He had put up flyers, knocked on doors, even contacted shelters. No one had seen him. Until now. "I don't know how to thank you," Walter said. "You don't have to," Ethan replied honestly. But Walter wasn't the kind of man who accepted that. A few days later, Walter showed up at Ethan's workplace. Ethan felt nervous when his manager called him into the office. Walter stood there with a neatly folded document in his hands. "I may be old," Walter said gently, "but I'm not powerless." It turned out Walter had once owned several auto dealerships across the state. He had retired years ago, but he still had connections. "I've watched you with Buddy," Walter said. "The way you cared for him. The way you didn't hesitate to spend what little you had." He handed Ethan the document. It was an offer. A management training position at one of Walter's former dealerships, now owned by a close friend. Full benefits. Double Ethan's current salary. Real growth opportunity. "I believe in people who do the right thing when no one's watching," Walter said. Ethan couldn't speak. This wasn't charity. It was recognition. Weeks later, Ethan stood in his new office, still stunned at how quickly life had changed. He visited Walter every Sunday. Buddy greeted him like family, racing across the yard with unstoppable joy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Walter turned to Ethan. "You know," he said softly, "Buddy wasn't the only one who was found that night." Ethan looked confused. Walter smiled. "You found purpose again." Ethan glanced at Buddy playing in the grass. Maybe kindness doesn't always come back in the same form you give it. Sometimes, it returns as opportunity, as healing, as a second chance. That night, walking back to his car, Ethan looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thanks, Dad." Because somehow, in saving a small abandoned puppy, he had saved something inside himself too. And that left him completely speechless.